and welcome to Off the Shelf Reviews. I'm your host Gary, and of course, hosting as well is Ian.
Hello.
And today we're going to talk about 1993 movie Stalingrad, which is the World War II movie of one of the most bloodiest battles in history. November 1942, the German advance into Russian territory, into Stalingrad. And this film follows a small group of soldiers through the entire 5-month campaign. Now, for me, this isn't necessarily a war movie. Most of this film actually deals with the soldiers, and you don't really get a bigger context of all of the events that are actually happening around them. You don't get to see the military positions, you don't get to see the maps. You're just there with the soldiers going through all of these things that actually happen.
Yeah. And obviously, if you know your history, then yes, you know, the German army advanced in, they had to fight the Russians from floor to floor, to house, you know, small...
Often room to room.
Yeah, small little detachments of Russians holding off like hundreds of Germans, and you don't really get it from this film. You know, the first time they step out into the cities of Stalingrad, it visually looks brilliant. The ruins are all over the place. You know, they're telling themselves to be quiet because there could be Russians in any of the windows of any of the buildings. And then stupidly somebody fires off their gun and the whole thing just kicks off. And I'm just like, okay, now I want loads of soldiers to run out and people to be fighting hand to hand and floor to floor. But you don't even get that. The camera kind of just follows these 6 guys as they start to get whittled down as the film goes on. You know, they get put into more and more engagements, which they are usually outnumbered and outmaneuvered.
Different to, say, perhaps Saving Private Ryan, which has the Normandy landing. Fantastic, massive set-piece battle sequence. That's a general way to start a war movie. You set your scene. Stalingrad has a very slow, very upbeat opening. We see the soldiers that are kind of on leave. They're on the beach. They're playing cards. They're drinking. They're kind of taking it easy.
Yeah.
And so that is your first introduction to some of these characters, and you see them get called straight away to a parade and a drill, and they've got to be tightly dressed in uniform.
Yeah.
And then, you know, from there they're taken out of that luxurious kind of holiday break that they're on to go to Stalingrad, and you see them marching and you see how happy they are. They're like, yeah, we'll be in there, we'll take care of them, and then we'll back home for Christmas. And you see that what I really like about this film is that you see they're slowly understanding that they are going to lose this battle. Maybe not necessarily the war, but you see the evolution of the change of the German soldier dealing with the fact that they have lost, that reinforcements are not going to come, and the misery starts to set in. And it is, for me, I thought it was really quite well acted, because they didn't have to tell you as an audience what was happening. You could see it on the actors' faces. You could see it in the cinematography when it showed the slow pans of what remained after the initial fighting in Stalingrad. So for me, it is very different from the conventional war movies.
Well, see, the problem I had, I was watching an English dubbed version of this film, and that immediately took me away from it.
Stupid asshole! You asshole! I was just trying to explain that the regulations forbid it.
If I'm going to watch a film like this, I want it in its pure native tongue. You know, I wanted German-speaking Germans with subtitles. That would have been easier to follow. But instead I had English dubbing over the top, and it was like a bad Godzilla movie.
They want us to go out first.
I'm not going out there.
Me neither.
It literally took me away because, you know, they're saying things like they're from North London, and I was just like, oh, that's just... Is that supposed to be funny? I'm supposed to be getting behind these characters, but instead they're just, you know, they just do something stupid. It's like I said, the visuals were absolutely breathtaking. You know, you had the ruins of Stalingrad that looked obviously awesome, but they were so compact. You never got the broad scope of the city. You didn't actually get to see anybody else fighting in other parts. You just had these guys. They moved from building to building, and then they'd move into the sewers and get lost in the sewers, which I was just like, how did you get lost? You were literally together 5 minutes ago. But at the same time, the other visuals, the gore effects were quite outstanding. I mean, there's one part where they've lost a friend in the sewers, and he stood on a mine, and his leg has been obliterated, but it's still hanging on. So they have to cut it with a knife to be able to carry him to the medical underground.
I grimaced when he pulled that knife and started cutting away. I mean, they had no sedatives, they had no tranquilizers or anything. It was just his screaming constantly, all the way to when they take him to the hospital. They pull a gun on the doctor and they're like, see to our friend now.
It's not really a doctor though, is it?
No. And it's just, it's just their camaraderie between them, and they just cannot let their friend die. And, there's hundreds and hundreds of people in all these beds that are in just the same situation as the one they've just brought in, and there's just no one there to deal with it.
See, some of the editing as well I had a bit of a problem with. It just seemed like there were scenes just jostled together to keep the film going, what you would expect from a war movie. It's like they storm into this the railway station, I'm guessing it was, and the sergeant taps one of his friends on the shoulder and says, shoot anything that moves, and they leave him, and then 2 seconds later one of his friends come running along and he blasts him, and I was like, you idiot, what were you doing? Couldn't you see he was wearing the same uniform as you? I understand in war, the anxiety gets over you, and he was a freshling and obviously didn't know what he was doing, but your sergeant's there. You don't just leave a rookie on his own and tell him shoot anything that moves, including your own side.
Well, he does turn and confess to him and say that, it happened to him earlier in the war.
Yeah.
And it's better that you shoot, otherwise, if it was the enemy, you would be the corpse.
Well, yeah, but then they kill the Russians, and the Russian is there dying. And I'd already watched All's Quiet on the Western Front before I'd watched Stalingrad, which is a better war movie, definitely. But it was that scene where he just is watching the Russian guy die, and I was like, I've already seen this before in All's Quiet, and it was better done then. He just kind of took it and then just carried on. There was just some of the scenes were made too funny because of the English dubbing. There was a scene where the camera goes into a little German command post, and there's a bunch of generals there, and I was waiting for them to start talking all the tactical details about all the different squads, but then the general just goes, we're in the shit. And I'm like, is that a general term? Is that an actual tactical term? And a couple of the guys like, yep, we're in the shit. We're fucked. The Russians are going to kick our ass. I'm like, come on, guys, get some morale boosting out there.
Well, I've also got to say that I also watched the English dubbed version of Stalingrad, and as a general rule, whenever I'm going to watch a foreign movie, I will watch it in its native language.
Yeah.
Just because the dubbing can take you out of the movie. Maybe it works for kung fu movies. You can kind of take that kind of added comedic value to the dubbing.
Yeah.
But with something as serious as Stalingrad, the English dubbing was really quite over the top in some places and didn't really feel genuine. So if you are going to watch Stalingrad, try and seek out the native language and watch the subtitles.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, in the UK, the only DVD release of the movie is dubbed.
Like we said, visually, the detail on the uniforms, the weapons, the surroundings, just everything was just so in place. But then they just got broken up between either a joking scene or an over-the-top harsh scene, which obviously you knew happened in the war.
Well, you've got to remember, this is from the same production team that made Das Boot.
Yeah.
And Das Boot, is one of the best war movies ever made, just also because of its fine attention to detail and historical accuracy.
Yeah.
Stalingrad is very historically accurate if you are aware of the bigger context of what was happening around the events of the movie.
Yeah.
There's quite a few documentaries on Stalingrad, and if you watch those in conjunction with the movie, you'll get a much bigger there's what was actually happening there.
Yeah, like I said though, there were just some scenes. I mean, like I said, when they go into the sewers and the whole squad is there, he gets lost within 5 seconds and meets up with this Russian collaborator, Irene, I think her name was. And he tells her, "You're going to stay with me," and she's like, she gives him her gun and gives him her knife. And they turn the corner into this room and she just pushes him into the sewage water. And I'm like, you're a soldier! Why weren't you expecting her to do that? You know, and I thought it lingered on him in the water too much. After a while I'm thinking, he swallowed some kind of poop. You know, he swallowed some kind of something that he shouldn't have. And the flamethrower guy who was leading the squad comes along and finds him. So I'm like, where's the rest of your squad? Are they lost as well?
I like the fact that they included the sewer scene because the Germans referred to the battle in Stalingrad as the Rat War, and that was because the fighting took place building to building, street to street, and an awful lot of the fighting also took place in the sewers.
Yeah,
which is why it led to the term being called the Rat War. But I like the fact that they had these other women that were there, these Russian women, because the Germans were actually shocked by the fact that Russian women were fighting them.
Yeah.
And it was the fact that neither side was allowed to retreat because they would both be shot. They would be shot, deserted, or coward, or whichever. And so the women that were left in Stalingrad, these were their homes. This was their families' homes. They just watched everything and this green, thriving, beautiful city be decimated.
Yeah, I mean, you did have the scene building up to that where the Germans have come across a woman and her children. Now, I actually felt that scene was quite harsh because the children are obviously scared and are screaming at the camera. And then the Russians come running in and they're just like, the woman's just like, they're down there. And I'm just like, oh, you bitch! You bitch! But then at the same time, I couldn't get behind the German soldiers because I wasn't too sure who was who. I knew who the sergeant was. He was the one who was actually didn't care about the Fuhrer anymore and was just kind of doing his duty. And you had the new commanding officer who wanted to do above and beyond his duty, but obviously in the confines of what he could actually do. He was kind of shocked with the atrocities that they were being forced to do on the people of Stalingrad. But then the jokes would come along, and I really got confused about what was going on.
If you don't stop walking now, I'll leave you right here, and you're as good as dead. You understand me? Go ahead and die then. It'll be your own fault.
Shit, keep moving, go on! Move!
I told you so, you idiot.
There's a part later on where 3 of them decide that they're going to try and get away and they're just going to desert. So they wander off and they pass some of the civilians of Stalingrad and they come across some tags to get them onto a plane. They get to the plane, they don't get on the plane because there are thousands of people trying to get on the plane, and then they just wander back to their friends. I'm like, why did you leave? You shouldn't have left. You should have just stayed with your friends.
It was the last bastion of hope. They've literally watched thousands upon thousands of their troops dead or dying, starving, the cold, the misery, the constant threat of dying. And so it was either sit here and die or just keep going and dying. And for me, it gave a sense of that hopelessness that just built throughout the entire movie.
See, that's what was kind of missing, though. We didn't see the broader scope. We saw these guys and what they were going to try and do to get out of Stalingrad. It probably would have been a lot better of a movie if we'd seen the whole of the German army and the whole of the Russians trying to fight in the city. But with the confines of budget and things like that, we just had to take what we were given, though. Really, I did really like the group scenes. I love the development of that throughout the film. They start on the train and they're all happy. They're going to Stalingrad. They're going to kick Russians' ass. You know, they're going to build highways on their land. And then the next time you see them all grouped together, they've been attacked and they've realised how, bloodthirsty the Russians are. So they're looking kind of a lot more withdrawn. Then the next time you see them all grouped together, there's thousands of injured people and they're just like, they're wanting to give up. And then the final time you see them, when they're just all sat around freezing, they're just like, oh, fuck this. Fuck this.
It's that last bit of desperation when obviously the Luftwaffe has completely left the battle They couldn't bring in any more supplies, and when they do drop the supplies, you see them like scavenging, just running out and grabbing whatever they can, only to find out that there's boxes of medals. It's like, what are we going to do with these?
See, but that's it. It's like their commanding officer comes out at that point, and he's waving his gun, and he's just like, you know, this is for commanding officers anyway, and he shoots one of the men, so they shoot him, and then while he's lying there dying, he's like, I've got a house, we can drive to it, and it's got full of supplies. I'm like, well, why did you leave that house? Why did you drive all the way out here for nothing, to kill a man, to get killed yourself?
The asshole.
Well, see, that was one of the things that the film did very well for me, and that was the difference between the Nazi officer and a German troop officer.
Yeah.
The evil, I use the word evil for the Nazi officers because some of their orders are just so despicable and so inhumane, they make your stomach crawl. And I sympathized with the German soldiers when they are forced to execute the Russians, and there's a small boy there, and they plead and they try to negotiate with this Nazi officer to let at least this boy go.
Yeah.
And you can see that the German officers are being, well, they're told either shoot them or stand up there and be shot with them. There's no room for sympathizers. It's just this is the way.
Yeah.
And you can see on the German soldiers' faces, you can see them, they're holding back tears, they're closing their eyes because they just can't bring themselves to do it. And there was a really good, clear divide between the divisions of humanity in the German front, and you got to really explore that within this brotherhood of friends as they were at this time, especially when he has the conversation about how he wrote a letter to his wife and told, just to say that he was already dead.
Yeah.
Just because he couldn't deal with the fact of he already knew that he probably wasn't going home, and he just thought it best to let her move on, just because where he's going, that nobody's coming back.
Yeah.
And for me, there's also a fantastic scene where I can't remember the character's name, but he explains there's a little switch behind your ear, and you flip it, and everything that's happening around you, it just becomes part of the scenery, part of the job.
There's a switch inside your ear. Just give it a turn, and it shuts off the brain. And
it's a way of not having to deal with it. But 3/4 of the way to the end of the movie and that character's still alive, even if that switch was, turned on, it's too late. He's dealing with everything that's happening around him. It's so monumental, the amount of things that they've been through, that nobody, even with the best, front, could hide the effects that what had happened around them was causing to them. And so I think for a lot of them, especially when they do just walk out there, they want to die. They want to end this because it's so horrific.
That's right. Yeah, I'm a coward. I'm scared. The whole fucking war just makes me sick. Where's my pay? I'm supposed to get 36 marks a month, and if I don't get it right now, then I'm going home on foot.
Calm down, Fritz.
The Russians must be held back, and that's our job. So you can see the fun isn't over yet.
Favourite scene?
I think, again, my favourite scene is with the same character where they go for a ceasefire. It's during the winter months, so it's December, January time.
Yeah.
And it's they're fighting building to building across the street, and they want a ceasefire so they can go in, bring back their dead.
Yeah.
And it's a really nice moment where the two officers from both sides come and face each other, and one has bread and the other one has sweet bread or a cake, and they hastily swap it without anyone shooting each other. And there was like a nod of respect almost between the two sides, that they don't necessarily hate each other because they are both soldiers.
Yeah.
It's the fact that their leaders are forcing them into this, and so they sympathise with each other, and so they can both understand the need to bring back their dead. And I also really like that moment because it's something that doesn't happen in today's wars. There's not that little bit of humanity that we saw there doesn't exist anymore, and I thought it was a really poignant moment, and I was choked up when the ceasefire was broken and stranded people in confusion were just getting shot by both sides. It's gut-wrenching, some of these scenes, and I think that this film explores them fantastically well. I was really blown away by some of these scenes.
See, my favourite scene is one of the scenes at the beginning. It took me out of the film and just made me laugh out loud. It's a scene where all the soldiers are stood around a preacher, and he's blessing them and telling them, you know, that God is with you, and that it is inscribed on every German soldier's belt buckle. And I think it's the same character we're talking about, who just happens to look down at his belt buckle and goes, I never noticed that there. And it just made me laugh out loud.
Oh shit, I never noticed it.
There is no work that is holier.
But at the same time, took me out of the film just for a moment to go, oh, I got to remember, it's a harsh war film. I'm supposed to feel bad about these people and not laugh at them. Yeah,
that brings me to a point where the original writer for the movie, when he submitted the script to the studio, they made a lot of changes and said that your version was too realistic and too gritty. So they made a lot of changes, so much so that the original writer had his name removed from the credits. So I would have rather have seen that original version than some of these jokes that were put in there. It was a film that didn't need to have those light-hearted moments.
At least we managed to get Rusky's stove. I stutter after every attack.
Better to stutter than to end up dead.
Yeah.
Gotta talk about the tank sequence though. This sequence was amazing, really. I did not expect what was going to happen. You had all of the platoon in holes in the ground, in foxholes, waiting to ambush a unit, and then you just see these 6 to 8 tanks come around this tree line, and I'm thinking, you're fucking joking, right? There's 12 guys against tanks, and it's brilliantly done. They're attaching mines to the tanks to blow them up. They're throwing Molotovs. Their friends are just getting slaughtered left and right. There was one guy who gets hit by a tank shell. His legs are blown off, his arm is blown off, and you just see his torso in the middle of this field and just watch it die. And I thought, wow.
It was grotesque. It was horrific. There was the same scene where I remember one of the guys, he was giving out the mail at one point, and he's there, and the tank comes over, and his hole's not big enough, and the tank comes over him, and then starts doing 360s above his dig hole just to make sure that he's not going to pop up and drop a bomb. And I was just, it's so savage. The battle sequences, few though they are throughout the film, are incredible.
Yes. Visually, this film is brilliant. I recommend this film to anybody, any war movie fan out there. It's not going to be for everybody. It's not really one that you can just sit down and watch on a Sunday afternoon, you know. But it's not the greatest war movie ever made, but it is very good. It tells the story, much like Das Boot, it tells the story of the German side, and you see the horrors that they had to go through as well as what they had to inflict on other people. Like I said, it's not for everybody, but, you know, I do recommend it.
I also recommend Stalingrad. I don't necessarily put it in the war category of movie. Though it does have some fantastic set pieces, it is much more a drama to do with the soldiers. Initially, you're under the illusion that it is a war movie, but you don't really get. So we don't get to see the bigger picture. We don't get to see the masses of troops. We don't get to see all of the the Air Force. We don't get to see all of the tank divisions at all. So the scope of the movie is very, very small, and that is the movie's strength. It is watching these characters emerge out, from their large platoon to just a few remaining soldiers, and the exchanges between them and how they motivate each other just to keep fighting the good fight until it's over.
Yeah.
So on that level, that is Stalingrad's primary strength.
I lost, but I'd like to share it with you, Herr Leutnant.
Thank you, Herr Hauptmann.
Thanks for watching Off the Shelf Reviews.
You know, Hans, at home, when you die as a soldier, at least they're proud of you. That's something, isn't it?